Thank you for participating in this virtual town hall, a new experience for most of us, and a good opportunity perhaps to show what we're encouraging government agencies to do. I'm Richard Griffiths with the Georgia First Amendment Foundation. I'm going to be doing my best to be both the moderator and the Zoom tech for this session. First, I want to introduce our panelists. Jennifer Colangelo is the Assistant Attorney General at the Georgia Department of Law, the Attorney General's office. Open government is her thing within the AG's office, running the Open Government Mediation Program, which helps citizens and government agencies resolve transparency-related disputes. Lisa Cupid is a Cobb County Commissioner recognized for considering all interests before the Commission. Cupid is an attorney and a former mediator, policy analyst, and engineer. She is also on the Georgia First Amendment Foundation's Board of Directors. Tom Clyde is a First Amendment attorney representing media clients. He's a partner at law firm Kilpatrick Townsend. Clyde serves on GFAF's Board of Directors and co-chairs the Foundation's Legal and Legislative Affairs Committee. Sarah Brewerton Palmer is a First Amendment attorney with Kaplan Cobb, representing media clients and maintaining a pro bono practice focused on First Amendment issues. She also serves on the Georgia First Amendment Foundation's Board of Directors. Then Jim Zachary, Deputy National Editor of Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated, a news provider to more than 130 communities in 22 states. CNHI's Georgia outlets are in Dalton, Milledgeville, Moultrie, Thomasville, and Valdosta. Jim is also the president of the Georgia First Amendment Foundation. I'm going to start off with a round of questions, then open it up for your questions. I want to thank Kathy Brister, the principal organizer of this event. If there are technical glitches today, they will be my fault, not Kathy's. I'm going to start with a public official, Lisa Cupid with the Cobb County Commission, who, as we joined this recording, was answering the question, as an elected official, what has proved most challenging about balancing the need for rapid response with the requirement to keep the public informed?
However, communicating with every commissioner to get buy-in from a majority has certainly been a challenge. And I think even just for our head to know what measures that he needs to bring to our attention versus what he doesn't has also been a challenge for all of us during this time.
Jennifer Colangelo, you've been on the front end on all of this and seeing lots of fussing and head scratching and worrying. Are the public meetings conducted via video conference and teleconference considered open under Georgia law? And what about other channels like public access TV?
Yes, they are. Again, you have to keep in mind that state agencies have always been allowed to meet by teleconference. So for some agencies, this is not new. They have methods where people can attend in person and watch a video feed. They can watch a video feed on their computers or listen on their computers, and that will be considered sufficient public access to that teleconference.
So are there any exceptions to the law for teleconference? What about quorum? Do you still have to have everybody there on the video conference for the quorum to be legal?
Yes, you still have to have a quorum participating in the session.
So how do city officials manage the teleconference and allow the public to be able to see what's going on?
So the methods we've used in the past are probably not going to work anymore because most of them involved everyone coming to the meeting room to watch and listen. Now we need a different way. So things like this, obviously the Zoom. I'm not sure if anybody has tried Facebook Live yet. There might not be a whole lot to see, but at least if there's a speakerphone where you can hear the audio of the conference call that the council members are on, that could be broadcast over Facebook or some other online video feed.
So, Lisa, how has the COB Commission handled meetings so far? What have you guys done?
We had our first public meeting after the epidemic last week, Tuesday, where we met in person. And it's my understanding we'll have a special called meeting tomorrow, of which I've expressed some concern about all of us convening. I've asked to be video conferenced in to the meeting, and I don't know if other commissioners will follow suit, but there was a concern that if we all video conference in, that it will not comport with the Open Meetings Act.
So Jennifer, what's your answer to Lisa's concern or the concern of some of the other commissioners?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the definition of teleconference is no one is in the same place, but they're all together electronically. Everyone's able to hear each other and just talk with each other.
Is there any reason at this point to suspend the open meetings regulations? You know, a lot of city governments are worried. They've got to get people taken care of. You know, this open meeting stuff just really gets in the way of us serving the public right now. Any thoughts about that, Tom Clyde? Tom Clyde, you are muted. Let me unmute you. I can figure out how to do that. Actually, I'm unmuting Sarah too while I'm at it. There we go. And Tom Clyde, you are now unmuted.
Great. Very good. I don't think there is any reason to suspend either the Open Meetings Act or the Open Records Act. Both acts have tools that exist inside the legislation that are there to help in this kind of situation. The Open Meetings Act, obviously, as Jennifer has talked about, has a teleconference ability, and that sets the floor. Obviously, you can use tools that are available with modern technology above that floor that provide a video component, so that's great. And then in terms of the Open Records Act, one of the provisions of the act allows you to identify when you are going to produce records. That's a tool that enables people to take into account the other challenges that the government agency is facing at that moment. So there's tools in place that make both acts work well.
So if we are thinking in the real world, how does the public find out about an online meeting?
That's a good question.
What are the legal notices for that, Jennifer?
Agencies can keep doing what they've always been doing, which is notifying the legal organ. They certainly could hang up signs at the usual meeting place, just in case anybody wanders by. But again, we have so many resources now. Posted on the Facebook page. So many agencies, even if they're not technically sophisticated, at least have a Facebook page. They have Twitter accounts. It's not too hard to electronically get the word out to everybody.
And if they're having a public meeting, how do they figure out how to get in? How does the public figure out how to get in? One of the big technical questions is, well, do you need a Zoom code? Do you need, are there limits on the size of those meetings? Sarah Brewerton-Palmer, you've been thinking a lot about the technology and the technical pressures about all of this. What are your thoughts about how this works in the age of coronavirus?
Yeah, I think there are, thankfully, a lot of different solutions out there, because I think every agency is going to have some different needs based on what size of meeting they typically have, whether they have a public comment requirement, things like that. They're going to need some different functionality. So there are a lot of different tools you can use. Zoom is a great one if you can afford the license. It's fairly inexpensive month to month. To get, you know, I think 250 is where the participants cap out, which is pretty good for a public meeting. The chat function can allow you to do public comment, and most of these services also come with a dial-in phone number, because I think we should be thinking about folks that don't necessarily have broadband access and maybe just have access to a telephone. So a lot of these services have both the video streaming component through the desktop and also a dial-in, which is good for variants of functionality.
And, you know, it's going to be on the public to be technically up to speed. Even on this call, we just see a group chat. We're functioning, we're having a meeting, but some folks are not able to hear this meeting. And they've got to have their end sorted so they can actually hear the technology on that end. What are the real world problems covering city government, county government for journalists, Jim Zachary, in the age of coronavirus?
So just for context around that, people need to be able to trust their government more than ever before. And trust comes from a place of transparency and openness. And by the same token, government has got to trust the media. So when reporters are calling and asking for information, they're not trying to catch local government in some technical violation of the Open Meetings Act, or they're not trying to trick some public health official into giving out personal, private patient information or violating HIPAA laws. But there just seems to be sometimes a disconnect that reporters are facing where government sort of errs on the side of giving way too little information. So think about the things that you as an individual want to know. So if people are testing positive in your community, you probably want to know their age. But that's one of the pieces of information that reporters are having great challenges finding out. And I'll give you some context about why that's really important and how it's a challenge that we're facing. So very early on in this crisis, we were basically led to believe that people that were under the age of 60 were not at risk. But now we're finding out that that is not true. Well, the media is not here to sort of place judgments on those kinds of things and make some kind of value judgment about that. But everybody needs to have as much information as possible to make informed decisions. And so we're encouraging local government and health officials to understand that when reporters are asking you for information, we're in this thing together, and they're trying to provide communities with information that they want, and more importantly, especially at this time, that they need to know. So government can probably be a lot more forthcoming. In fact, it can be a lot more forthcoming than it's being right now. And don't create sort of an unnecessary adversarial relationship between the journalist and the public health official. And we have I think Richard might want to talk about this later, but we have a lot of great success stories of local officials that are getting it right.
I have a question from Robin Kemp to the panel. What about government agencies saying they cannot fill open records requests filed before the emergency due to office closures, especially if employees are teleworking? Are those agencies going to get into trouble? Jennifer, you want to take that?
It depends on really how much technology an agency has. If someone were to send me an open records request, I have a lot of access to our office's electronic documents, and any of us could probably respond to an open records request, unless it's a physical file. On the other hand, say you have a small town, maybe if there's an open records request, maybe the city clerk could go into the office one day. She'd be alone and she could do some work responding. But I mean, there's certainly maybe situations where the files are just not accessible. And as for the question of whether or not anybody would get into trouble, again, I'm not sure if that would be a reason to lose a lawsuit. I'm not sure if everybody could sue all of us at once. But it's just important that agencies just do their best and that citizens have a little bit of patience.
And that means patience too on the end of the journalists and the citizens who are anxious to get information. You know, and I think there's probably different things. If we're dealing with an immediate crisis relating to coronavirus, that's a different thing from if it's talking about a traffic light that's malfunctioning in the center of town, that perhaps could wait. There's another question related to Tom's earlier comments. With an indefinite state of emergency, how does a local government give a reasonable estimate on when responsible documents will be provided? I think Jennifer kind of got at that just now. Let me ask a question related to the state of emergency. And Jennifer, you may not know the answer to this. Perhaps there are others who do. If we are ordered for the public to stay home, what are the rules going to be about covering the news? Are journalists going to be permitted to go out and check the supermarkets to see if there is actually food deliveries taking place? What are the challenges for the public's right to know what's going on in a state of emergency where the public health declares we probably need to be sitting at home most of the time?
Legally, I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously, when the government tells us all to stay home, they don't mean doctors and nurses. They don't mean the people who run the supermarkets where we have to go shopping. And it's possible they can allow journalists out. I mean, journalists go to war zones and do reporting. And so I'm sure they're all willing to go out around the community and see what's going on.
Tom or Sarah, any thoughts on that?
Sure, I have some thoughts. So obviously there's been a number of shelter-in-place orders imposed throughout the country at this point. Every shelter-in-place order that I'm aware of has designated the media as an essential service and typically has done that explicitly in the order itself. And so that does mean that the public will still be getting information about how government is performing, how society is keeping up with the COVID-19 crisis. And that is very consistent with the way things have worked in past emergencies. In hurricanes and tornadoes, in times of war, there's always typically an exception that allows the media to continue to keep the public informed about how things are unfolding, because that's very important to everybody feeling they have at least as much control and knowledge as possible about what's taking place.
Let's talk a little bit about the challenges for governments in getting the word out to their communities. Jim Zachary, you're dealing with a bunch of different communities all across the country. How are you seeing governments getting information out to the public? Are they doing daily briefings? Are they doing weekly briefings? How is that working?
So what we're finding out is that a lot of local governments are being extremely responsive to media requests. They are conducting regular briefings. We encourage them to go beyond just sort of those daily or twice daily briefings and be accessible to the media. The media is probably more important right now than it's ever been, and people are curious. In fact, if you look at media websites, they're getting more traffic than they've ever gotten before, and we're seeing that across our landscape, but I think all media are seeing the exact same kinds of things. And when government understands that we're not sort of an adversary in this, the media is a partner in providing this information to the community. And Tom's words are so incredibly welcome. And we've noticed that in those states that have issued these sort of stay-at-home orders, that the media has been identified as being essential. And that's exactly what we believe, that the media is vital to making sure, because of how robust our platforms are, that the media is able to keep people informed real time. You know, when we see local officials sort of not being as responsive, that's a disservice to all of our communities. And if they'll reach out to their local newspaper or television station or radio station, they're going to find a willing partner that is able to help keep their communities informed.
Russi Patel has asked a question, and Russi, if you're close to a microphone, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question, since you were citing Maxwell versus Carney Supreme Court decision. Mr. Patel, Ms. Patel, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here. Basically, the question gets down to if a city or county only has a capability of having a teleconference line that has 10, 15 people that could be allowed on it, that Supreme Court decision basically says if you have the ability to have a bigger room, you need to move to the bigger room. Well, technically, everyone has an ability to go to a bigger teleconference line. It's just going to cost money or something like that. So how does that apply in this situation?
Jennifer, you want to take that?
I guess that's something that is sort of just on a case-by-case determination. It's true. The Supreme Court has said that if it's sometimes not everyone can watch the meeting, and that can sometimes be okay. The same thing can happen with a teleconference. More people try to call in than you're expecting. And really, each agency has to do its best, has to make a good faith effort to make that meeting open to as many people as possible, knowing that there might be a little more interest than there normally is in, say, a city council meeting.
Russi, do you have a follow-up to that?
I think that answers it. Thank you.
L. Ramsey has a good question. I'm going to find you on here and try to unmute you. Let's see, here we go. L. Ramsey, your question, please.
Hey, thank you. It's really related to Rushi's question that you just had. We do have a lot of areas of the state that don't have broadband capacity for a lot of the options that were talked about earlier, whether it's your Zoom meetings, your Facebook Lives, and then particularly if you talk about areas where citizens may be told to shelter in place and they don't have good broadband at home, they obviously have limited ability to call in to public meetings. And again, I think Rushi's question was similar, but are there recommendations that you have for meetings in that context?
I can talk to that if you want, Richard. A lot of these services you don't actually have to use online. Even if you're using a Zoom online service, you could still just distribute the call-in number for actual phones to the public and have them call in. So there won't be a video component, but that's by no means necessary under the law. Teleconference is perfectly fine. And there are also a couple teleconference services you can get that are relatively inexpensive that allow for pretty high capacity teleconference calls. And as long as one person who's using Zoom on behalf of the agency has access to the online platform, you can do selective muting and a lot of those special features, but the public doesn't necessarily need to have the access to that.
Joe Parker, you have a question. Let me get you unmuted. There you are. Joe Parker, go ahead. Joe Parker? Let me ask Joe Parker's question. My county commissioners plan to continue to meet in person. Each commissioner's individual, he says, throne is widely separated, more than 6 feet. They have staffers attend in person for their convenience. Under the circumstances, I think they should allow a reporter to attend in person. The room is large, 20 feet of separation is possible. Thoughts on that, Jennifer?
It's hard to know exactly what that commission would be thinking if they said no to that. It sounds reasonable to me. Again, thinking of what the CDC has told us to do, maybe that would work. If the county commission is being overly cautious about possible transmission, I don't know. It's hard to know without knowing exactly what the commission is thinking about the reason for not allowing the reporter, if that's what they're doing.
Joe Parker, are you able to follow up on that? Let me see if I can unmute you again. Joe, can you follow up on did that answer your question? Okay, I'm remuting. Let's see, from Steffi Kuntz. Steffi, let me see if I can unmute you. You are unmuted.
Hi, I'm on the City Council of Dorville, and we've already held a couple of virtual meetings, but we've been sticking to just talking about emergency-related topics. And our attorney and we are concerned about staying within the open meetings guidelines, but being able to conduct regular business, especially things like public hearings on zoning stuff we've been considering, and how that relates to teleconference meetings.
Jennifer, any thoughts on that? There's no difference, right, based on what you've been telling us so far. If it's held on video conference, it's regularly announced.
That's correct. I think a lot of us have been suggesting to cities and counties that they hold off on anything that's not urgent. Maybe in a few weeks they'll be able to get together and hire new companies to mow the lawn out front of the courthouse and that sort of thing. But things that have to get done, they're going to have to go ahead and do them.
Yeah.
Stephen, did that answer your question?
Steffi, but yeah.
Steffi, sorry.
No, I'm again, we've got, some zoning stuff we've been working on, and I hate to just put everything on the, because it feels like you're kind of in gray area when we're getting the instruction to hold off on things that aren't important. Where do you draw that line? Either we are or we aren't. That's my concern.
Richard, if I may weigh in?
Yes, please.
Yes, in Cobb, we decided to postpone our zoning meeting because public participation could be limited. And I know we've talked about how the public can have access to some of our regular meetings that are called for emergency purposes. But I know from history that we get all slices of life that show up to our zoning hearings to weigh in on a matter. And it might be that some of those who would see a zoning sign 2 or 3 streets down and know to go to a meeting that's posted on that sign may not necessarily have notice about a zoning meeting that's called under these circumstances. And so as a fellow elected official, I would be highly concerned about limiting public participation when they can have a zoning nearby that could impact them.
Cecil, you have a question. Let me unmute you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. And to follow up on Councilmember Kuntz's discussion, it's sort of the same issue, which is, as I've looked at the emergency teleconference exception in the open meetings, some of the commentary that have been out there said that the scope of the meeting had to be limited to the scope the directly related to the emergency. And, being in uncharted territory, we've tried to be very cognizant of that as we've talked about these conversations. As I'm looking at this, and Jennifer, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Right now, day one, a certain scope of things have to be taken. If this lingers and we're still meeting in this manner in 4 weeks, suddenly what becomes the appropriate scope expands to things that may not have been emergencies on day one, but by the time you're 4 weeks in, the predicate could exist. And I was thinking it should be put in the record before we take up an issue to say, here's why this is a critical issue. Here's why we believe it needs to be addressed, and then sort of move into the issue. That's different today than what could be critical in 4 weeks. And I was just hoping I could get your thoughts on that.
So the provision of the Open Meetings Act that allows for emergency meetings that are held without 24-hour notice, I think does suggest that those emergency meetings should be about the emergency and not an opportunity to get other business done. But the part of the act that talks about these teleconferences being held because of a public safety emergency, just the language of that, I don't think that language implies that you're limited to talking about the emergency. This is an ongoing emergency. It's going to last for a while. Our teleconference meetings can touch on other topics besides just, the coronavirus.
Cecil, did that answer your question?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Next question from Robin Kemp, a reporter. Let me get Robin unmuted here. Robin, go ahead with your question. Whoops.
Hi.
There you go. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Hi, yes, thank you, Richard. What are some of the recommendations you might have for jails or prisons to disseminate current procedures about how they're managing COVID-19, how many suspected or confirmed cases they might have in the facility, any enhanced protection measures that they have for correctional staff? Is that something that they could just post daily on a website, for example?
Tom, do you want to take a swipe of that, or Sarah?
Sure, I'm happy to take a shot at that. So first of all, obviously, jails and correctional institutions are going to be in some of the most challenged circumstances in dealing with COVID-19 because an outbreak inside the facility creates a real risk. So they're going to get some latitude in connection with that. But for the family members of people who are incarcerated, obviously it's incredibly important to know what's going on and how things are being managed. So I think it does put a lot of emphasis on them trying to keep the public informed and the families comfortable that it's being managed. So I think use of the website is a good approach to that. And generally, one of the things that's important to understand is that with respect to HIPAA, HHS has indicated that it will, as is always true with HIPAA, the emphasis is on protecting the public and protecting privacy of individual patients second. So if there is a need to disseminate information in order to protect other people, that is allowed under HIPAA. If there is a clear threat to other people, HIPAA allows that exception. And HHS has emphasized that last week, actually.
So repeating that, if there is someone who is sick at a council meeting or in a particular community that may have infected a bunch of people, there's no HIPAA protection for the individual if the public health of 20 other people or 5 other people is affected. You may not want to name them by name, but it is not against the rules to say, yes, we had a jail inmate or we had a city councilor who may have been positive.
That's exactly right. In order to protect the well-being of others, even institutions and organizations that are covered by HIPAA can make the decision to disclose information, even if they've not been permitted to do so by the patient. HIPAA gives them that latitude. And if you look into the future, there may come times when individuals are not cooperating in their medical care, where even their name may have to be disclosed to protect other people. And that is authorized under the HIPAA law as it currently exists, if it's necessary to protect the health of other citizens.
From Rashid Patel again, he's got another great question here. Let me see if I can get him unmuted. There you go, Rashid.
Sure. If the government administrative building is closed to the public, can we deny the request from someone to inspect the records in person based upon the public health emergency, or do we need to just delay, or how do we handle that?
Jennifer, can you take that?
When a government building is closed for a short time, I mean, that's not unusual. When a school district is closed for Christmas, you might have a whole week at a time where nobody's in the district office to answer requests and make records available. Obviously, if this stretches on for a long time, we're going to need a different solution. It may be that just one single employee from the agency could come in, retrieve some records on a table, and then one requester could come in and review those records. That's not going to work for agencies that have a lot of requests. But if this goes on for a long time, I think agencies are going to have to come up with some sort of solution similar to that.
And E. Jordan, you have a, if I can unmute you, well, apparently I can, there you go. Well, for some reason, E. Jordan, I can't seem to unmute you. So his question or her question is, please discuss the notification requirements for emergency and non-emergency meetings. I know some meetings have opted to meet in outdoor locations to meet the social distancing requirement in teleconferencing. What process should be taken? So I think there's 3 questions in there. What are the notification requirements for emergency and non-emergency meetings? Sarah, can you take that?
For non-emergency, your regular business that you're just doing by teleconference, it's all the same standard notice requirements that typically apply. For emergency meetings, that is going to kick into the less than 24 hours notice requirement. So if you are doing your regularly scheduled business, at least 24 hours ahead of time, you have to let the public know. If you have to handle something really quickly, you can have less than 24 hours notice that you should let the public know as soon as you know you're going to call that meeting so that people can be prepared. But that's the distinction between the 2.
Is there any difference between teleconferencing and meeting in an outdoor location where people are separated?
Not really that I can think of. In terms of notice, no.
L. Ramsey, another good question from you. Let me come down and unmute you. I can do that. There we go. You are unmuted.
Okay, thanks. So this question has to do with the emergency management statutes. One of those provisions says that during an emergency, like we're currently in, that powers and functions of government can be exercised without regard to time-consuming formalities and procedures otherwise prescribed by law. Has anyone given any thought to how that provision interplays with the open meetings and open records requirements for timing, notice, etc.?
Jennifer, would you be able to take a swipe at that?
I'm not sure that anybody has really gotten into an analysis, a deep analysis of that yet. We've had so many things we're having to figure out for the first time here. I guess the only guidance I would offer is if for some reason if an agency thinks that they're not going to be able to comply with the Open Meetings Act or the Open Records Act, their first priority should be making sure that the community can watch these meetings or listen to the meetings and know what's going on. Because I think that is the most important thing, is that people know what their local government is doing. People are more likely to listen to their mayor when their mayor tells them to stop gathering in groups than the CDC all the way in Washington. Atlanta, I guess, here. The most important thing is that citizens are able to know what's going on, even if you're not doing everything else by the book.
Ramsey, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
We have a question from the public. The Georgia Department of Corrections has responded to media inquiries with, quote, due of the rapidly evolving nature of COVID-19 and the need to prioritize resourcing, we may not be able to answer specific questions in a timely manner. How can a citizen or journalist procure vital information that needs to be disseminated to the public relating to the Department of Corrections? Thoughts on that, Jennifer?
I think agencies should probably take a look at the requests that they're getting and maybe prioritize the requests that are coming from a journalist, coming from somebody who they know is going to be distributing that information. If it's a small town and you have a local blogger everyone reads their blog, maybe that will be a good person to prioritize so that person can spread the information around. If you know somebody who's going to post it on their neighborhood Facebook page for everyone to read, prioritize those requests so that your information is going first to the people who can distribute it.
Jim Zachary, you're talking to a lot of reporters. What is working out there across the country? What are some of the clever things you've heard about that cities and counties and municipalities are doing to make things work?
Actually, I think it really comes down to the practicality and the common sense of it, that it's not particularly innovative. One of the things that we've got to understand is working at home does not mean not working. So even public officials, if they're working remotely, still have access to their email, still have access to servers, and are still able to interact both with the media and with the general public. But I will tell you that I've seen some local public officials, public information officers, really be amazingly transparent through this process, but sometimes even they are acting under misnomers. Let me call out a few individuals. So down in South Georgia Medical Center has dealt with this crisis as much as any rural community in the state, now with multiple confirmed cases, and their communications department in particular, a woman by the name of Erica Bennett, has been so responsive to reporters who I'm sure are texting and calling nonstop, and is answering those directly, not just through press briefings, but providing information. The South Health District, Kristen Patton, constantly is staying in communication with reporters. So those are the kinds of things that are important. But to go back to something that Tom said earlier, I think that all health agencies and local officials have got to understand that just because someone said at one point that you can't provide certain pieces of information doesn't mean that that's necessarily true. So as a matter of course, what's happening is that communities are frustrated, and they're frustrated with the media because we're not telling them, for instance, where people work or what their social circles are or what their age is or how they may have interacted with the general population. Those are pieces of information that people need to have for themselves so that they can make informed decisions. So we believe, while it's important, that this level of access that we're seeing happening, not just sort of in one community in Georgia, but throughout the state and throughout the country, go even to the next step and provide people with specifics that they need. You don't have to give people's names and addresses and telephone numbers, but you can give us a little bit more information about the likelihood that somebody has been in contact with someone that has been exposed to the virus or who has tested positive. So there are success stories, but understand that we are in this together. And I'll say one more thing here very quickly, and that is, if local government will look to their media as being a partner in providing this information, we know that there are a lot of very rural communities in Georgia that may not have access to the technology. But I'll just about guarantee you that your local media does have the technology. Partner with them to live stream a meeting. Partner with them to allow video conferencing, and work hand in hand with your media to keep the public informed.
So working hand in hand is one thing, but you know, a lot of communities don't have the resources, the technology. They may not fully trust the local journalists to do some of that stuff. Is it a problem, Jennifer Colangelo, if a city or a county just wanted to video the meeting and then post it online later? Is that the same thing as allowing the public to see it in real time? They're being transparent, but not till later.
We have case law, an appellate decision that says no, that is not equivalent to letting people watch the meeting live. It's a great idea, obviously, to say you get in a situation where only 10 people can call into your teleconference line. If you record it and put it up on the website later, then everyone will have a chance to see it. But everybody should be making everything they can to let people watch or somehow access the meeting as it happens.
What should citizens or public officials do if they believe elected officials or government agencies are actively violating the state transparency laws during this crisis? What can they do? What should they do?
Well, our office has our mediation program, of course, where people can contact us and tell us about problems. And we'll reach out to the cities and talk to them about what they need. There's a lot of resources out there for cities to try and figure out what to do. They can contact the Georgia Municipal Association, the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. We have a lot of information we can share with cities and counties. If they're not doing things correctly, hopefully that's just what they need, is some more resources.
And you are continuing to work. You may not be in the office, but you're answering your email and returning phone calls.
Yes, I am.
We have 12 more minutes here. Priscilla, here we go. We've got another question relating to the problem with a lack of response to requests for information of correctional facilities is happening in a non-emergency times. What can be done about that? The emergency to mask, I think, is the question that she's asking. That kind of goes back to the state agency role, right, Jennifer?
So which question is this? I'm sorry, I'm trying to read
It's
along.
Priscilla to everyone here at 1147. The problem with lack of response to requests for information of correctional facilities is happening in non-emergency times. What could be done about using the emergency to mask that? So I think she's asking what can be done to even in non-emergency times.
That's a tricky situation with your correctional facilities, because they always have an issue of security. They always want to keep the facilities secure, and they're careful about what information they release. And they're probably going to feel like releasing certain information about this emergency could compromise security. And so it may take some repeated conversations with the correctional agencies to figure out, to help them release as much as they possibly can.
Lisa, let me end with you here with a sort of summing up. We'll do a sum up from the panelists, but I'd like to start with you.
Okay.
What are you hearing from your constituents? Are they able to get the information that they believe they need right now? What are you hearing?
We haven't received any emails with respect to open records, but citizens want us to act. They want us to make decisions to protect their public health. And when we're not meeting and talking as a board, it limits our responsiveness. And that has been our primary challenge. Again, we'll address that tomorrow during our special call meeting. But I think that's going to be our limitation moving forward, is how can we make remote policy decisions in a timely manner, or how do we make public policy decisions in a timely manner to address things that are evolving every day.
Tom Clyde?
So I guess the things that I would just try and emphasize are transparency is extraordinarily important at the moment in terms of keeping the public confident that this crisis is going to come to an end. So one thing I would encourage every agency to do is try and expedite the handling of anything relating to COVID-19. And then beyond that, I think the other, I do think there will be a lot of latitude given to organizations and agencies that are clearly doing the best that they can under the circumstances. These are extraordinary times. What I think a lot of people will judge is our institutions doing the best they can with the resources they have to comply with the Open Records Act and the Open Meetings Act, and generally to try and provide transparency in this time period. That good faith will go a long way.
One follow-up to earlier comments you made, Tom, from our bunch. In regards to state agencies surpassing HIPAA to put protection of the public above the individual's privacy, what tools and support do journalists have to hold agencies to this standard?
So basically, an agency should be in touch with their local health service as well as the national health services. But I do think that HIPAA gets used reflexively sometimes to try and refuse to disclose information. And I think it's very clear from the decisions that got made last week and the language of HIPAA itself that agencies shouldn't be allowed to use that to prevent the public from getting information if the information is legitimately a matter of public concern. If it's legitimately a matter of public concern and necessary to protect the safety of others, it's allowed to be disclosed under HIPAA. So pushing back on any sort of reflexive use of HIPAA is an important part of the process.
Sarah Bruton Palmer, last thoughts from you, please.
I would reiterate everything that Tom has said about acting in good faith, and everybody's just going to have to do their best to figure things out as we try to figure out the best solutions to comply with these transparency laws in the state. The Georgia First Amendment Foundation is trying to muster as many resources as we can to help everybody figure it out. If you go to our website, gfaf.org, on the resources page, we've posted a recent blog entry last week that kind of walks through some of the things that we've talked about today, and as well as lists some technology resources that you might be able to use as you host open meetings. We're always available if you want to reach out and have any further questions. So, I think everybody should just be doing their best to figure out the solution that lets the public have access to these meetings as we go forward.
Jim Zachary, last thoughts?
It's a full-throated message to local public officials. No one's playing gotcha here. So the media is not trying to sort of catch you with some technicality. The other day, Larry Hansen, the director of the Georgia Municipal Association, reached out to me, and Larry's long been a friend of open government. And one of the things that Larry said was that local officials are scared that they're going to run afoul of the Open Meetings Act or the Open Records Act. Comply with the spirit of the law. No one's looking for some small technicality. There's no need to suspend the law. We can work together to keep our public informed.
Jennifer Colangelo.
One thing I've suggested in the past to local agencies that they should definitely be doing a lot more of now is simply communicating with people who make requests. If somebody makes a request and it's not clear, the agency should take the time to reach out to them, talk to them about what it is they need. If it's a record that's difficult to find, suggest some other records. If everybody could go at this with a outlook of collaboration to try to get people some information, I think that is going to keep things moving smoothly.
So last comments from me, I think. Thank you to everyone. We are going to do a frequently asked questions based on this session. We will be pulling together this video and posting it online. I think we will be able to get that up pretty quickly today. And we hope that we can keep these lines of communications open. One of the things I've been really struck by with all the questions from the public officials is that everybody seems on this call to really want to do the right thing by the public. And that is one of the great things that gives me hope about how we get through this crisis, is people who work hard to do the right thing, trying to figure out how they can get us through this all in one piece. Thank you very much, everybody. Great day. And thank you again to Kathy Brister, the organizer of this event.
Thank you.